Hey guys, it's Debbie Potts, the host of the Low Carb Athlete, doing another one of my series of fueling and training the low carb athlete, which doesn't mean zero carbs. So we're talking about strategic carb timing, talking about eating a nutrient dense whole foods diet. The macronutrients are going to vary per person, per gender, per life stresses, per daily schedule and exercise intensity and duration. So it depends. That's why we do coaching to help people figure this out. So I am the creator of what I call the holistic method that I created 10 years ago. I've been a personal trainer. I started that way, 25 plus years ago. So been in the industry for a long time. I've been an endurance athlete. Oh, since 1995. I started my first Ironman Canada 2001, and I did 15 Ironmans before I became burned out and broken from doing too much of everything, including running my own fitness studio for 10 years, and thankfully closed that October 2019. And during that time, I was competing at a high level age group triathlete, marathoner, long distance cycling events I love to do as well, and 50K trail runs for fun in the off season. But I was owning this fitness studio in Bellevue, Washington that was high rent. And then over the 10 years since I opened, all these other studios and Orange Theory and Soul Cycle and other fitness studios all started popping up, and life got very stressful as a small business owner with a very high rent. So my chronic stress is what I experienced, and metabolic chaos, the result of that, living life as a race, not as a journey. And that brings me to today, my purpose and my why and my drive to help you avoid going through what I had happen starting in 2013. I had health issues. We also call it adrenal exhaustion. So this is why I do what I do. So if you want help, that's why I created the holistic method, and I do coaching, kind of a new client special. I do the accelerator program, look at what you're doing, nutritional therapy assessment, but also adding functional lab testing. So we investigate, are you doing everything you could be doing now based on our investigation and grabbing clues from labs, from genetics, from ancestry background, and from what your life is like now, and create a personalized program for you. And that is a great way to go. Or what I do more so now is doing a VIP comprehensive coaching program that includes everything for 6 months or longer. So I'm just following my purpose and my passion. So just to review, if you haven't watched any of my presentations on YouTube or conferences, or listened to the podcast that we've had over 10 years, the Maffetone method we started years ago doing. I started doing 2003 heart rate training with Sally Edwards before Maffetone's max aerobic function heart rate. And I worked with Mark Allen, Align elite team. Mark Allen created that back in 2000 something. I started being on the team, I think 2004. And then I started doing metabolic efficiency testing 2005. I started doing low carb-ish experimentation back then as well, and got into more low carb, high fat athlete. I don't know, probably 2010. And 2012 was my last Ironman Hawaii. My mission that I like to talk about this a lot for now is that I was doing low carb, high fat, and I was doing a lot of more fasted exercise, but I was doing a lot of training. And I'm trying to tell athletes that the guidelines out there that we hear for keto, for fat loss, for fasting, fasted exercise isn't right always for you, the high performing individual, the high performer athlete, and you, the female athlete. So I was doing all these right things, but October, it was August 2013 when I started to feel tired. I was not able to work out. I was not able to sleep at night. I was fatigued all day, depressed, had no energy, and I gained 30 pounds without doing a thing. So why I do what I do now is to help you not, get to that point, to actually, if you feel fine, you should be doing this coaching type of program with me or somebody that understands you, because I had probably a lot of red flags for probably 10 years, but I didn't know that. I pushed through it because I'm type A driven, ambitious athlete. If you get that, I'm sure you're similar to me. So that's why I reach out to people that are like me, because I'm trying to help you take care of yourself now before you are broken and burned out and taking years, if not forever, to get better, because I still can't do a marathon or an Ironman. My body can't go that long and can't race anymore. And it has nothing to do with my age. It's the damage I did to my body, probably at a cellular level. So, low carb athlete, I'm not going to go through all this as much. You can look at my ebooks on debbiepotts.net. But today I just wanted to review again on a specific podcast how to become fat adapted. So these slides are all in the ebooks, and there are plenty of podcasts on these topics and previous videos on my YouTube channel, Low Carb Athlete, if you're listening to this. So Peter Defty, for example, talks about OFM, optimal fat metabolism, strategic carb timing, improving your carb tolerance once you're fat adapted. When you are a fat adapted athlete, we can improve how we train, moving up that metabolic crossover point. So when we do a metabolic test, we can see that switch over from the fat starting to drop down and carb usage starting to increase. We can find that and ask me in a few months how to get tested, because I will start doing that again with Pinoy here in San Diego. But it's getting to that point. How do you get there? So we want to improve our metabolic efficiency, our ability to burn fat at higher intensities, faster. We can run higher heart rate or faster speeds at burning more fat at higher heart rates. We can bike higher power output and faster speeds at that lower heart rate. So think about Maffetone, the max aerobic function heart rate he created years ago. You really want to stay around there and then work on adding in some speed work when appropriate. So that's the exercise part of it. And how do we train our bodies fat or fuel? We talk about that with my coaching program with Peter Defty. We talked to him plenty of times, OFM model, and really depleting glycogen and fatigue is what happens when you are burning more carbohydrates and being fat adapted. You have more glycogen sparing. So what I do when I'm training my athletes of all levels is work on nutrition, exercise, sleep, stress, movement, mobility throughout the day, which I need to get up and move because I've been sitting here working. Every hour I should get up and do some squats and stretch. But digestion, gut health is huge. And I'm going to do another podcast on that because I'm researching the Super Gut book by Dr. William Davis, creating SIBO gut yogurt probiotics, and looking at people's labs. I see everyone's got LPS, endotoxicity, leaky gut, and a huge amount of dysbiosis or depleted microbiome because they're on antidepressants, on medications that are supposed to help you, but they're actually making you worse because your medications can be depleting that microbiome, killing off those good bacteria. And so we're having more low amount of good bacteria and just really low immune system. So nutrition, fueling and training low carb athlete. I was inspired to do this video today because someone I was swimming with in Masters, and he was telling me he's doing keto. Well, I like to think of it as an athlete, how to become, I don't like saying keto, as I say, I like to be calling it a whole foods, nutrient dense diet that balances your blood sugar. So I think keto and paleo and carnivore, all these words get really abused in the industry. So go back to ancestral eating. Primal health is eating nature's foods. So when I'm working with people, we start with, what are you eating? Let's focus on looking at observing your relationship with food, how you are eating, when you are eating, why you are eating. Are you intermittent fasting? Do you have 4 hours in between meals, or are you just grazing all day, overloading your digestive system, not giving it digestive rest as we do with intermittent fasting? And intermittent fasting is not always best as 16-8 that you hear about for athletes. Especially female athletes, we're better off doing 12 to 15 hours, and 12 hours should be general rule for everyone. You should be not eating for 12 hours just normally to give your body some rest, digestive system, and your liver detoxification system. We want that housekeeping service to arrive when we're sleeping at night, not trying to digest that food you just ate before you went to bed. So I look at what you eat, how you eat, when, why, and where. Where are you eating? Are you standing up, working, doing 5 things at once? Are you in your car? Or are you actually sitting relaxed in that parasympathetic nervous system state and ready to properly digest your food? Now, athletes, when we're training, we want to match the amount of exercise with our calorie intake that day. So if you're on a rest day, you can go lower carbohydrate, do less calorie intake, but still focus on your protein intake and getting that maybe more of an intermittent fasting day that day a little longer if you're not doing your exercise. So that's more mobility and walking, low intensity exercise, but matching your training and feelings is something we want to look at when I'm coaching athletes. Fasted exercise, I've done lots of recent podcast videos. So check out fasted guidelines. Dr. Dan Plews program, EndureIQ, suggests female athletes, different than male athletes, should only do fasted training late follicular. So say like day 7 to day 14. And that should only be 2 to 3 times a week if you're doing fasted exercise. So carb timing is important, with the lowest carb meal earlier in the day, and post training is your lowest carb intake or largest carb intake. So timing where you place nature's carbs, not crappy food as your carbs, but really figuring that out. So fasted training, low glycogen training can enhance your fat oxidation and training adaptation. Training without carbohydrates can teach your body to increase fat oxidation. But that's for men. For women, we might be a little different. So be aware of the warning signs when you're doing too much fasted exercise, which I've done, and many people I know out there probably have done. Too much fasted exercise when you need to add more calories, you have excessive weight loss. If your heart rate variability is going down, so that's a negative drop, not positive. And sleep quality, your deep sleep is really low. Your REM's not great, your recovery is poor. So, using your aura score and figuring out what's going on, and your glucose, if your glucose is higher. So women, all those things might be a sign of too much fasted exercise for men, but your numbers for HRV, sleep, and glucose will be not as good in your luteal phase as your follicular phase. So take that information as stress, but it's body normal luteal stress. Your body's saving its energy to protect you from stress and help you make a baby, even if you're not. So those are information on the slides you can get on my ebook on the website. So again, if you are doing too much fasted exercise, you need to look at your weight dropping too much. Poor sleep quality decreases HRV, increase in glucose, and stress, remember, impacts everything. As this is what happened to me. I was doing all those right things, but chronic stress will raise your glucose. Chronic glucose being raised results in chronic activation of insulin, and that chronic activation of insulin leads to insulin resistance. And go back the other way, or not the other way, but look at the other elements impacted with chronic increase in glucose is cortisol is going to be up with high levels of glucose. If cortisol is always activated, your thyroid is going to be impacted. So chronic stress not just impacts cortisol and glucose relationship, but also your immune system, and your thyroid is put on hold. So that's why when you get your thyroid tested, you want to look at the reverse T3. That's the brakes on your metabolism. So that's going to be activated when cortisol is excessively high, and eventually it'll be below normal. So If you are doing fasted exercise, light exercise, low heart rate workout. So you're going to do your fasted exercise session. If it is fasted, should be low zone 1 type of workout. Okay. So if you are doing another workout within 8 hours that day, and that workout was low or maybe a little harder, you do want to eat a meal with a little bit of carbohydrates. If it's like 20 grams, challenge yourself. If it's 20 or 40 grams, no more than 60 grams of carbs in there for athletes at once, but try to experiment what works for you with having that with a protein and fat. So don't eat dinner an hour or two after your late afternoon workout and early evening. That will help you be more fasted state for your late afternoon early workout, because I can't eat and then work out. I'll have digestive stress, especially if I go swimming. So if you do need some calories, having some amino acid, I like taking the ketone, HVMN ketones. I've been trying to do in the morning adrenal cocktail by Jigsaw Health, has good amount of vitamin C and creatine, aminos. Put those in a cocktail or with some LMNT. That's really good combo. But if I do need some calories, I have some layered superfood coffee creamer, and it has the adaptogens in it, the mushrooms, and some coconut sugar for their little bit of sweetener. So it's just like 10, 20 calories. So it's just enough to make sure my body doesn't feel stressed. So I won't go over this again, but it's just something to look at. S. Fuels and Ben Greenfield talked about. Just to touch again on fasted athletes for females, limit the fasted exercise days 7 to 14, and matching, as I said, your fueling and your training. So high energy intake with high energy output. So we want to make sure we don't have that negative energy flux. And remember, we have lower energy input and output in the luteal phase. So take it easy, more nurturing, eat good quality food. So kisspeptin hormone is something you want to look at. So go to my ebooks on women's health for mapping out the menstrual cycle and listen to Dr. Mindy on upcoming podcasts. Okay, so let's hop over. I'm not going to go through any more fasted exercise, but we're going to dive into the EndureIQ program on how you can adjust from maybe a little more carbs or maybe even new processed foods, and you're going to transition to higher carb to lower carb diet. So I'm skipping through all these slides so I can get to what I want. So pre-training and post-training, that's EndureIQ suggestions. I go through this with clients. Strategic carb timing, going through this with clients because it's so individualized. But here is where I'm trying to get to. Dr. Dan Plews, how do we get the fat adapted athlete? So we have it in phases. Phase 1 is baseline, as I said. I just kind of start with the client this first week, 5 days or so. Let's just write down what you're eating. Just totally be honest, be real, don't change anything. Just create a baseline. So I'm just monitoring what you're eating. I like my clients to start using a CGM by NutriSense, or there's levels, heart rate variability testing, or you can do Keto Mojo and monitor glucose and ketones. We're just collecting data. So I'm just trying to learn about you, learn when you eat, the why, how, and where. And of course, what you eat. Now, phase 2, we move into whole foods. We've learned a little bit together about your relationship with food in phase 1. Now let's go to phase 2 and let's see what, swap. Instead of doing this, why don't you try eating this? When you're eating out at this restaurant you go to every week, let's look at these other options that are better choices. When you're eating at home, here's some meal ideas. Now, I don't prescribe any specific meals because that's up to you. I give suggestions and give alternatives and suggest, like, here's what you can get if you shop at Whole Foods or you go to Trader Joe's, Costco. Here's some great ideas. But we're just taking baby steps because I want this to be a new lifestyle. So it's not going to be something we're just going to go cold turkey. We need to train your body gradually, get off the processed foods and get off the high carb, high sugars. Processed packaged stuff is really the biggest thing for people. and then starting to eat whole, nutrient dense foods that are in season, ideally local to where you live. So then we get to the big part. This is where I think people jump into this a little too fast. It might be too much shock on their system. So it depends on you, the individual, if you're just going to do this and switch back to your old ways, or you're going to do this and switch to the new you and make this a lifestyle. This is not a diet, remember? So we're trying to train you baby steps. So week 1, week 2, week 3, here we go, cold keto. 3 weeks for men. Women are going to do this phase in 2 phases. They're going to be days 7 to 14 of your cycle, because we don't want to do anything stressful in the luteal phase, and we don't want to do anything first week of your cycle. So that pre or the early follicular phase. So days 7 to day 14 of your cycle for menstruating women, this is when you do cold keto. If you're postmenopausal, you can follow what the guys can do. So 3 weeks, you're going to go 70% fat, 50-gram total carbs. Focus on eating animal-based diet, nutrient dense, healthy fats, nuts and seeds if tolerable. If you have a lot of gut inflammation based on my nutritional therapy assessment, we might need to avoid these nuts and seeds unless they're properly prepared, or do a nut butter so you don't have to digest them. They're not irritating on your gut. Non-starchy vegetables. Most people can't do the phytates, lectins, and oxalates in FODMAPs for some. So we look at nutritional therapy assessment first. Do you have signs and symptoms of bacteria overgrowth, small intestinal bacteria overgrowth, SIBO? Or do you have symptoms of different issues with certain foods? So non-starchy vegetables are going to be your cauliflower, broccoli, asparagus, Brussels sprouts, stuff like that. They're really good, nutrient dense, and beneficial for liver detoxification. So those are great options. Now, phase 1, how do you work out? This is where I'll move my little video here. Normal training program. Just do everything you're doing now. I just want to learn from you. Phase 2, when we were just swapping out the foods, your workout routine is going to be the same, but let's drop the volume down 10%. Okay. That's phase 2, week 2. Now we move into that phase 3, cold keto, when you're ready to transition to that based on your menstrual cycle. For cycling women or men, you're here 3 weeks. This is where you got to drop the cardio training sessions down, low volume down. This is why I want to do this, because I was talking to someone today. I'm like, wait, you got to take it down. He worked hard workouts every day this week. And as your transition going down cold keto, let's match your training to that time. So reduce your training load by 20 to 25%. So this is for endurance athletes that are doing a lot of volume. Drop that down. So you're doing about 75% of what you normally do. Maintain 2 HIIT training sessions per week. And Dr. Dan Plews talks about that. Why? Because you're still not fat adapted. So this way it can deplete that glycogen storage and get little energy from the glucose, because you're still not dependent on fat if you're coming from a higher carb intake athlete. Now, phase 4, we transition to after the cold keto phase, because cold keto phase is not forever. That's your adaptation phase, where we're switching your metabolism to be a fat metabolism, and you're able to use ketones made in your liver for your brain health. So glucose and ketones can help. That's why I take the HVMN ketone IQ, because it's just additional fuel for my brain. So phase 4 is sweet spot where we do adjustment. Gradually increase training here, up 2 to 3 weeks. Return to your normal training structure. This is where we course correct. And this is where it's really important to work with the coach to figure out what macronutrients work for you, what's your carb tolerance, matching your nutrition to your exercise days. And also, we really want to look at your functional lab testing. What's your food sensitivities? Do a Vibrant Wellness Food Zoomer or nutrient test. I like to do Dutch hormone panel, a comprehensive blood chemistry test with all your hormones, serum, and then of course, a GI map or Genova diagnostics test. So it's really important to see what's going on to make a individualized coaching program. Whoops. Okay, so phase one, just again, you're just kind of monitoring food diary, HRV, glucose levels, establish your normal ranges, collecting that baseline data, starting to understand everything. When you're in phase two, we're switching to nutrient dense, real whole foods, begin to avoid processed foods, vegetable oils, which are, I think, something you need to be aware of that are worse than having sugar is vegetable oils and processed foods. So the vegetable oils is more toxic long-term than sugar. So you can burn off sugar by going for a good hard workout or doing some sprint intervals, but vegetable oils are toxicity to your cells. You can follow Dr. Kate Shanahan to learn all about vegetable oils. So learning how to real food taste and creating new eating habits here. Green food and orange foods on our food list from Dr. Tim Noakes' program is what they suggest looking at. Increase in glucose, carbs can go too low too fast before your ketones can be made by the liver. So that's a stress, and stress causes increase in cortisol and then increases inflammation and increase in glucose levels. So too much too fast is a red flag. So this is why we do this in phases. It's phase two, we're increasing glucose if we drop the carbs, if you drop the carbs too low. So you have to be careful. So 2 weeks here, and then phase three is the cold keto, finding that where your ketones 0.51 is great, up to 3, no more than 5 on your ketone meter. Using 50 grams of carbs per day for 3 weeks for men. Women, well, that's for men and postmenopausal women. Women, we want to remember days 7 to 14. So you're finding that sweet spot, 50 to 130 grams per day, matching your feeling and training when we get to the next phase, but that's progression. So goals to average 50. Afterwards, you might find 100 to 200 grams of carbs is your sweet spot, depending on your season, depending on what period of the season you are, your training schedule, sort of matching that training and feeling. So it's going to be different if you're training environments and it's peak season, you're doing tons of volume, you're going to need a little more calories. You might find the more anaerobic workouts, you're going to need more carbohydrates. So timing that's good. Testing and not guessing really makes a difference. HRV, chronometer, track your macros, glucose, ketones. I use Practice Better for a practitioner program, and your chronometer can sync on there. Your Aura Ring score or Whoop can sync to training peaks, and so I can track all this. So again, cold keto transitions out 3 weeks, monitoring everything, and then go into phase 4, the course correct, finding your sweet spot. Now, Dr. Dan Plews talks about during his Ironman season, when he was training a cold keto day, his intensity is lower, duration is lower, a few HIIT training sessions, but a cold keto type of day for some athletes would be MCT oil and collagen in your coffee, workout. Your meal, post-workout meal is going to be a little bit more replace your carbs, still keeping the carb low, but you can have eggs, sardines, and broccoli and cook those eggs into coconut oil. Then Dr. Plews has another coffee. That's a little too much for me. I can have 2 cups in the morning max, but coffee, and then put some organic heavy cream or, get a coconut creamer. And then if you need a snack, he would have a S Fuels bar or almonds. Not everyone can do that, almonds, but maybe a nut butter packet or F-bomb is actually, I used to love those. But that's if you're doing a double workout day. In this cold keto, you have to remember you need to drop your workouts down. So your double workout day should still be 75% of what you normally do. And then a meal would be, see, this is a guy, he can eat way more, but salmon, olive oil, avocado, asparagus is another great meal. And that's his lunch. And then his dinner would be a steak, simple salad, plus dark chocolate for dessert. And that keeps carbs under 50 grams. So it's not that difficult to go low carb and not feel you're missing out. So if you focus on getting that good, healthy fat and protein animal source, as your main fuel, and then some good lower carb vegetables that are good for your liver is asparagus and broccoli or cauliflower and Brussels sprouts. So it's easy. So just remember when you're doing the cold keto phase, you want to pay attention to those metrics. So if your heart rate variability is dropping in a negative way, this might be a normal response as you're going through cold keto. So it takes 2 to 3 weeks to adapt from being a high carb athlete to a low fat or low carb fat adapted athlete. So your glucose you might see increase because that's the cortisol in response to this stress on your body. So it's just as the body increases ketones and be able to metabolize ketones in your liver, ketones will be that byproduct. That ketone now becomes your fuel. So this is where it's a good hack to add your HVMN ketone IQ shots when you're going through this transition phase. The other trick is to do higher intensity workout during cold keto phase. It keeps your body helping it during the adaptation phase. It's normal to have lower performance output, but just because you're not able to exercise just from fat, you have to do a glycogen depleting workout sometimes. So sleep also can be disrupting during this time. So carb timing at night, 10 grams to help sleep, like having a little bit of honey sometimes helps people at nighttime. If you're feeling that it's interrupting your sleep, you don't want to mess with your sleep. That's sacred time, right? And then keto flu, you hear about that's when you want to have more minerals as almond tea or rheolite or just some more vitamin C salt on your food. But make sure you get your magnesium. I love BioOptimizers. Check that out. I just wrote a blog, shared what they talk about magnesium benefits and their masszymes and Capex. So big hacks there from BioOptimizers, really good. So finding your sweet spot, it could be 100 to 200 grams a day is where your carb intake is. So that's why I try to stress keto athletes or low carb athletes doesn't mean zero carb. It's not crap carbs. You're avoiding processed junk food, okay? So it's nutrient dense, nature's foods. And that carb intake can be 100 to 200 grams. So having your fats from your animal sources and having your vegetables as your carbs and then cooking them and make bacon and cook your broccoli in there is amazing. Having avocado and olive oil and your meat and vegetables, it's so filling. So eating the foods on the green list and orange foods from the Banting diet, Dr. Tim Noakes or Professor Noakes, I would say doctor because he's so smart. Professor Noakes. And females, remember to adjust those macros luteal phase. That's when your carb intake can be higher. And monitoring your adaptation phase while you're matching nutrition and training is really important. And matching change your training in each phase to match your nutrition. So just kind of tracking all your biometrics. And then we go into other podcasts that talk about what is that sweet spot, finding which carbs are good for you. Your glucose might be a little bit higher. So adjusting the carbs too high, or maybe you have other inflammation. So you want to do that blood chemistry test to figure out what is your inflammatory markers saying. Too high of intensity, you're not having enough recovery time. So looking at what this information says, your carbs are too low or training too high can make things backfire. So checking out your training, checking out your carb intake, high intensity performance might be decreasing. So that's when you want to adjust those carbs. So really finding that sweet spots, that N=1 experiment, what is my workout like? Is it crappy? That's a sign. If your workout's getting slower, not faster, that's what I've been experimenting with. It's like, all right, I can not eat, but my run workout is really slow. So let's experiment by having a little bit of Laird's creamer in my coffee that isn't then sweetened. Have a little sweetener in there that's natural from coconut sugar. So then adding in more orange foods that's on the list for dinner and before your morning workout says 20 grams might be from beetroot, which is good for liver, gallbladder, bile flow, vegetables, a squash, looking at what season it is. It's November right now. So having foods locally at season you can buy at your farmer's market. And then you can look in cycling in and out of keto. So you're low carb during the day, nutritional ketosis, the nighttime meal, you're going to have a little more carbs. High intensity workouts, you're going to need a little bit more. And then timing the carb intake after the workout to refuel. So you want to look at more targeted ketogenic diets called TKD. cycling in and out. You can do like the 5 days low carb, 1 day higher carb. So it's keto flexibility, refeeding carbs 1 day, really keeping that metabolic flexibility both ways. So you can metabolize fat and you can metabolize the carbs. So it doesn't mean, avoid carbohydrates and being into carb burning. You need to have metabolism to burn both fat and carbohydrates. So it's more, why is my metabolism broken? So listen to Jeff Feldman. He has great information. So learn more on my podcast, and my website, as I said, has all the show notes in there. So hopefully I can help you with these solo podcasts, learn more on specific topics. So if you could leave a review if you like what you're hearing, if you want to suggest specific topics to dive into, let me know and I will be glad to help. So talk to you soon. Let me hear from you, debbiepotts.net, or share the podcast on your social media and tag me and I can share it as well. Thanks.